Hello, I'm Bob Weir, interviewing another notable person in North Texas. My guest today is Ross Kessig, Vice President of Local Affairs for Empower Texans, a nonprofit service organization which advocates for good government and holding elected officials accountable. Thank you for being here, Ross.
Thank you.
If you would please give our viewers some background information on yourself and your organization.
Sure. So like you said, I'm the Vice President of Local Affairs for Empower Texans. I'm actually a native of Denton County, and so I'm from the local area. I've lived in the Metroplex my whole life. The whole mission of our organization is to help citizens restore self-governance, for them to be actively engaged in the political process and being involved, just not in voting, but actually after the election, in terms of following what their elected officials are doing and holding them accountable to what they'd like to see. We generally focus on fiscal issues here at the state and local level in Texas. So we're primarily focused on what state lawmakers are doing, the Texas legislature, as well as what all the cities and counties and school districts are doing here at the local level.
So, in a recent article, you wrote about what you call a glaring conflict of interest between local government officials and the appraisal district. Please explain.
Sure. So every county has an appraisal district that assesses the value of your property, your home, your business, and then that value is used by the taxing entities to determine what your actual tax bill is going to be. And so your tax bill, your property tax bill, which everyone in Texas is concerned about and should be concerned about, is a function of the property value and the tax rate levied by all these local taxing entities. And the problem in Denton County is that you have a locally elected official, the mayor of Louisville, who's actually been appointed to be the chief appraiser at the Denton Central Appraisal District. And so by having influence over the appraisal value and being an elected official who also has strong influence over the city's tax rate, it obviously poses a conflict of interest there.
I see. So, in your opinion, someone who has influence on the property tax rates should not have influence on the appraisal value of the property in his or her town?
Yeah, I mean it's clear to me. Although it's not illegal, it certainly poses a conflict of interest to have control over the appraisal values and the tax rates for the city of Louisville. What most people don't know is that the board of directors, who's kind of the ultimate accountability folks for the appraisal district, those board of directors for every county are chosen by the local taxing entities. And Denton County has two locally elected officials on the board of directors for the appraisal district. And that isn't as bad as having those people then actually choose another locally elected official to actually be the chief appraiser, which is what Denton County has done. So you kind of have two issues. You have locally elected officials serving on these boards who are ultimately responsible for oversight of the appraisal district, of how properties are appraised. But in Denton County's case, they've actually chosen another locally elected official to be the chief appraiser, who basically has the final say over every appraisal value in Denton County.
All right, well, let me just go over this. I made some notes about this earlier, just to make this clear what you're saying. The property tax we pay is based on the tax rate, which our local government decides on, and the property value, which is decided by the appraisal district. So you're saying the people who decide on our tax rate should not be the same people who appraise our property?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, to be on both sides of that poses a serious conflict of interest, and there should be a firewall between the taxing entities who levy the tax rates and the folks who are who are deciding what the appraisal for the properties are being appraised at. I had a conversation. This article will come out this week on EmpowerTexans.com. I had a conversation with State Senator Paul Betancourt out of Houston. He's a former tax assessor in Harris County. He actually runs a private business helping people protest their property appraisals. So he's a strong expert and tax hawk in the area of property taxes. And I asked him, I said, what do you think about the fact that this mayor of Louisville is also the chief appraiser in the same county? And he said, oh, without a doubt, it's no question this is a clear conflict of interest. It shouldn't occur. And in fact, he said his staff looked at it and found that there's no legal prohibition against it, but that in a future omnibus property tax reform bill that he would file, he would include a ban of this type of conflict of interest from occurring.
Okay, however, you also say that this conflict of interest remains legal under current
Right.
state law.
Correct. So it's currently legal. Now, of course, that shouldn't necessarily be the standard of what we should allow to happen in government. Just because something's legal, doesn't necessarily make it ethical or it doesn't make it right, I guess. And so it is currently legal. There's nothing unlawful with what this gentleman's doing by being the appraiser, what the appraisal district is doing. And that's why Senator Betancourt said he would like to make these types of arrangements unlawful in the future.
Would that be a bill that he's proposing?
Right, so the legislature would have to pass that legislation and then prohibit these types of conflicts of interest from occurring. Now, the Attorney General's office does put out a document that shows dual compatibility, where you're serving in two different offices and whether or not people should do that. Some, I think, are prohibited by law. And others, they recommend that you just don't, that should, are dual roles that just should not occur. And that's called dual compatibility.
All right, let me ask you also, Empower Texans says Texans don't own their home, they rent it from the government. What does that mean?
Well, if you have to pay a tax to own a piece of property, then you never really own it, because if you want to possess the property, in the case of your personal property, real estate, you have to pay a tax so long as you own it. So you don't own it in the sense that in order to own it, you have to pay a tax in perpetuity to the government. Texans are rightly concerned over their property taxes. Texas homeowners pay the third highest tax rates, the highest percentage of their home values in the nation. So we have very high property taxes. One of the reasons is because we have the second highest per capita, per resident, local debt in the nation, even more than California, and almost all of that local debt is repaid with property taxes.
Well, if we didn't have a property tax, how do we pay the bills for services and so forth?
Yeah, so there's kind of two ways to look at this. When it comes to public education, we pay a lot of money. More than half of your property tax bill goes into K through 12 public education, and that's also funded by the state. So if we wanted to get rid of the local school tax, we could do that by the state chipping in more and more money into public education over time, and eventually phasing out that tax. And we support that type of approach.
How would the government get the money to do that?
So the state budget's always growing typically, and so if you can control spending growth and not overspend, you could use some of that money you aren't spending to put back into education. It would probably take several decades to do that, but we're not currently on that path now. And the other way is to levy a consumption tax.
Okay, well, that would be a way. In other words, you'd be replacing the property tax with a sales tax, for example.
That would be one way to do it. That would be better than like an income tax. And so, you could supplement education funding, for example, by having the state, increase the sales tax, but then, eliminate and phase out the local property tax. So we don't want to raise the overall tax burden on the economy. We don't want to take more money out of the local economy. What we want to do is levy taxes that are the least burdensome to taxpayers, and consumption taxes are generally a better way to tax than a property tax. It's also a lot more equitable. The way our property tax system is very complex. The compliance costs are very high because most people don't contest their appraisal value. The variance between what properties are appraised at, that can vary widely. There's also a big variance between what residential properties, homes are appraised at versus commercial properties. And so there's a lot of complexity, and therefore you're going to get a lot of inequity in a property tax system. And the compliance costs are much higher. A sales tax, a consumption tax, is a much more equitable way to tax people.
Because when you buy something, you pay the sales tax and you're finished with taxes.
Right.
there. I mean, that's all you have.
Yeah, when you go to the store and you buy groceries, or you go and you buy a TV, you pay a sales tax on the purchase. You don't pay a sales tax on the television the whole time you own the television.
Right.
Which is what we do with our homes.
Sure. All right, is there anything else that you'd like to add about Empower Texans?
Yeah, I just think that citizens need to generally get more involved in what their what their elected officials are actually doing. So it's not good enough just to vote Republican or Democrat and then go home and assume everything's okay. We need to actually be engaged. Folks can learn more at empowertexans.com. We have a free e-newsletter and other ways that people can get more informed and more engaged in holding elected officials accountable.
Oh, that's great. Well, I want to thank you for being here, Ross, and thanks for your support of ethics in government.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for watching.